we're delighted that you really are here because as our brother Hanley was mentioning, that you guys are really the front lines of really ministering to our youth. That's really the trenches. It's not easy, especially in this day and age. But before I begin, I kind of want to introduce myself so that you get to know who I am. My name is James Hahn. I'm the senior pastor of Redeemer Presbyterian Church, and I planted the church 23 years ago. So we're a multi-site church. We are in Hancock Park in LA, which is like in between K-Town and Beverly Hills. And my second site is in Torrance, and that's where I live currently. So I've been pastoring for 23 years. I'm also an elected official in my city of Torrance. I'm on the school board. I was elected 7 years ago. So I get this privilege of serving my city by being on the school board. So I'm integrating with kids on a regular basis, especially when it comes to the issue of school and education. And my wife is also a principal in my city. And so it's kind of fun for me. I get to be her boss. The only time in my life I get to be her boss. At this one moment in my life. So I want to be on the school board forever. So I can always have that one above my wife. And so it's always a good thing. At the same time, I'm a parent as well. I have 3 kids. I have a junior at UCLA. I have a freshman at Claremont McKenna College. They just had a lockdown the other day. Active shooter on campus, a little bit crazy. And then I have a junior in high school. So I got one left. I got 2 more years before I'm set free. And so he's a junior in high school right now. So we have 3 kids, and they're the absolute delight of my life as well. So that's kind of my background. So that's why for me, like this topic of partnering with parents is absolutely real. One of the things about my church is that our church is in the PCA, the Presbyterian Church in America. So the way that we do our youth ministry is this. Our youth actually join us for worship. And so we have what we call covenantal worship, where our youth group joins us the whole time for our service. So all the kids that have been in our church for all these years, I watched them grow from elementary now all the way through college. And they've been able to participate in our worship. And the reason why I like it so much is because of the fact that our youth kids, have an opportunity to see their parents worshiping. They have the opportunity to see what perhaps worship looks like, right? Outside of their own peers, but to see it from intergenerational, from adults to elementary to middle school. So that when they leave high school and they go to college and when they're young adults, they realize that church is still the same. It's not geared to a certain age group, but it's geared for all different segments of all different age groups. And so that's been one of the blessings, is to watch our kids be able to model their parents and the parents that are in our church when it comes to worship itself. And I pray that the long-term effect would be, as they grow up and they begin to have their own families, that they will be able to impart the truth of the gospel to their kids as well. So today, the seminar topic really is this idea of partnering with parents. I'm also here to learn from you, right? I want to learn from you guys the things that you're going through, because I can only speak primarily from a Korean American perspective, because the majority of the people at our church are Korean Americans. So that has a unique perspective from a Chinese American church, a Japanese American church. Our youth pastor is a Japanese American. And so he's been a part of our church for 7 years. And sadly, he'll be leaving this fall, and because he'll be going to the mission field. He'll be going to Japan, serving in Tokyo, and we're delighted for him because of the fact he's going to an unreached people group, and especially that he's Japanese American. He can speak the language. He's going to rock it. He's an absolute stud, but we're going to absolutely miss him a great deal. So we kind of want to talk together about this idea. What does it mean for us to partner with parents? And this is real for me because I'm a parent, right? I know what it's like. I love my kids. We have a great relationship with my kids. Right now, I'm lucky all my kids are home. Because my daughter's on spring break, my son's about to run the LA Marathon this Sunday, and so that's why everybody's home. So my wife is absolutely thrilled, right? She loves it when all our kids are home. I can't wait for them to leave, because now I get my house back, my sanity back. It's a lot better when they're gone, but yet, you know what? We do really love our kids in every way. So today we're going to talk about this idea of what it means for us to partner with parents. And so I just kind of want to begin with the idea as what prevents us from partnering with parents? Right? What makes it hard for us to really have our parents engaged in our youth ministry? So I thought about this a little bit when I was preparing this seminar itself. And so one of the things that I feel like I wanted to start from was our perception of parents as youth pastors or as youth leaders, right? So often when it comes to parents in our youth ministry, we feel like we don't need them, right? Actually, matter of fact, they're more of a hindrance to our students. And the reason why we feel like they get in the way, they don't understand the kids, right? They don't understand us the way that we want to do them. And so we feel like they're an obstacle. And not only that, because of the fact that we feel like our students don't want them there, right? They don't want them to be a part of what they're having fun or what they're learning. So they kind of want that separation. And for us, we feel the same way. We feel like, you know what? We want them to be away from the youth ministry. We feel like they're more of a hindrance than a help. Right? That's how we feel. We feel like they're more of a hindrance rather than a help. And we have this negative perception of parents, right? So often we feel like they're the root cause of why our students are not growing. We feel like they're in the way of, they're the barrier for the maturity that our students can experience. Why is that? Because of the fact that they're the ones who take the kids away from our youth group, right? With all their activities, whether it be sports, whether it be academics, whether it be whatever thing that they have to do. We feel like they're always taking away the kids away from the youth ministry. Because of it, we don't want to deal with them, right? Not only that, but we also feel like we don't need them because of the fact that we feel like we're the experts. We know youth. We know youth ministry. We know what these kids know. More than the parents, believe it or not. That's how we often think. And so often, we feel like, you know what, we know better than them. That's why we feel like, you know what, we don't need to partner with parents. That's what prevents us from partnering with parents. But the second thing that I also feel like when it comes to the idea, I didn't put it up there, but I just thought about it again, is this idea, the reason why it prevents us from having partners, parents with us, is because a cultural shift as well. And what do I mean by that? Today, I feel like in our society that there was a bigger divide between parents and kids than ever before. And the reason why, one thing you got to understand in the school districts, what they value or what they're trying to strive for is this idea of student rights, student privacy. Now, this idea of student rights and privacy is really gaining traction, right? And so, for example, in our district or in the state of California, let's say your kid has a conversation with your teacher and she tells the teacher that, you know what, I want to change my pronoun or I want to change my identity. So rather than be called Kyle, I want to be known as Kylie, right? So you have that conversation with the teacher. By law, the teacher is not allowed to tell the parent. By law. You cannot tell the parent that your kid will now be referred to as Kylie and no longer as Kyle. And the reason why is because of that, it's about that student's right. And I get it, perhaps they want to argue the idea that it's for the safety of the child, right? Because if they tell their parents they want to change their identity, then the parents will flip out and they may physically hurt them, or they may abuse their child because of their desire to change their identity, right? But in my perspective is that so often when you do that, you put that kid at more harm, right? Because they're not getting the counsel, the advice, or the guidance from their parents or people around them to speak into their life. But the reality is, it's about their right. It's about their privacy, right? And because of it, parents do not have the right to know or the right to have that information. And so because of it, you're bringing this rift between student and parent. I remember a couple of years ago, I actually saw a situation where a kid actually filed in court where they would want to divorce their parent, right? They want to divorce their parent. Why? Because they don't want to have that authority over their life telling them what to do. And so our kids today feel like, you know what? I want to be able to do what I want to do. And I think that mindset has been embedded by the culture that we live in today, right? It's all about student rights, all about student privacy, right? So again, because of it, we feel like, you know what? Parents should not get involved, right? Or culture's telling us that, you know what? They don't need to be involved in that way. And so I think that's what prevents us from a parent's perspective, right? Our perception of parents, right? We feel like they're a hindrance. Students want their privacy. We feel like, you know what, they're in the way. They hinder our kids because of the fact they do all these activities. And we just don't need them, right? We don't need them. But another reason what prevents us from having parents who are involved is because of students. The students don't want their parents to be involved in the youth ministry as well. And the reason why they don't want them to be involved is because of the fact they don't trust their parents. They don't trust their parents. They don't trust their wisdom. They feel like, you know what, my parents just don't understand. The reason why, because they're from a different time or different culture, right? And they don't understand the way that things are done in America, right? America is different than where they came from, whether it be Korea, China, Japan, wherever that other country may be. And so therefore, you know what? I don't want them to be able to come and to speak into these matters because of the fact it's just different, right? A lot of times kids are embarrassed by their parents, right? We've all been there as immigrant kids, right? So I grew up in the early 80s. Hanley grew up in the late 80s. I grew up in the early 80s, right? And so I'm 53. So back then, it was really hard because I grew up in a very predominantly white area, right? And so we all have those crazy parent stories, right? Like, you know, my parent, you know, McDonald's is 3 syllables, right? But my mom made it 4 syllables, right? McDonald's, right? And you have these things, right? You know, or you go to like McDonald's and like you're in drive-through and then you order the food, like hamburger, French fry, you know, all this kind of stuff. And then she would say to go. Of course it's to go. You're drive-through. What else are you going to do? Sit there in the drive-through? It makes no sense. That you have these experiences, right? And it's funny because I watched this even with my own children. When they had to go and my in-laws had to take care of my kids. And my kids said to me, Dad, Mom, never allow Grandma and Grandpa to ever do this again. Because they wanted to die when they were ordering food for them at Arby's. They just wanted to shrivel, right? And so because of that, there was this idea of shame, right? They feel embarrassed by their parents. And so because of that, kids they feel uncomfortable when parents are getting involved or where they're volunteering. So they don't want that as well. They want their own privacy. They want their own independence, right? They want to be able to be kind of a place where this is my safe place. This is where I can ultimately hide, right? Away from my parents. And so the student's perspective of having parents involved sometimes are affected by these things. They feel like they can't understand. They're embarrassed by them. They have shame. And they just don't have a very strong relationship with their parents. So that's another reason why I think a lot of times as youth pastors and youth leaders, we don't want our kids, our parents to get involved, or we don't want to partner with our parents. But the third thing is obviously the most obvious is language and age barriers, right? Language and age barriers, right? And so a lot of times, you know, you can't speak the language, right? And so I'm notorious for this because my Korean is absolutely horrendous. Like, I can barely speak Korean at all, right? So, and that's the thing. So when you're dealing with first generation parents, you have this awkwardness, right? There's a lot of bit of insecurity. And I know that insecurity as I had to learn how to speak with these adults where I just can't articulate well enough of what I'm trying to express. So rather than dealing with that embarrassment, I would rather hide and not deal with them at all, right? So that's how we avoid the parents, right? That's why we don't have them to be involved in our youth ministry. Or it could be another factor is age, right? Is age. You know, because of our culture, we have this uniqueness of where if you're younger, you just feel weird to talk to someone older. And I think that's kind of embedded in us because of the way our parents raised us, the way our culture is. And so for us to kind of like instruct or kind of give advice or kind of like speak to older adults, again, it puts us in a really uncomfortable, odd situation where we feel like, you know, I just don't feel comfortable, right? And so we feel like they look down upon us with our youthfulness. They feel like, you know what? They don't, you know, you don't understand what it's like to be a parent, especially if you're like a 24-year-old, 25-year-old, and you're telling this 45-year-old guy about their child, you know, it's kind of an odd situation. And so because of it, because of our age, we also say, you know what, I would rather not deal with parents. We don't want them ultimately to get involved, right? And so when we think about these three categories, right, it's the way that we see parents, the way that our students see parents, right? And then the language and age barrier, right, it prevents us from getting our parents involved, right? And I think that's what's hard. And I think these are real issues that we all deal with when it comes to the kids, when it comes to parents in our church, dealing with our parents in our youth ministry itself, right? Do you feel like you understand that? Do you feel like these are the barriers that you feel through as well? Like, is there anything that I want to learn from you too, like, is there anything that you feel like also prevents you from having parents involved in the youth ministry or getting involved with what you're doing with youth. Did I miss anything for you guys? What you experience, like when it comes to parents, like you're probably thinking, that's why I'm here, because of the fact that I'm having a hard time with this, Lord. But is there anything that you feel like your own personal, yeah?
The parents' perception of themselves.
Okay.
So maybe sometimes they might feel like they don't fit in with the kids. Like I'm older, maybe my language barrier, so they're also maybe aware of these things.
Yes.
And they feel like they sort of exclude themselves as well.
Right, because they don't feel they belong either. Right, yeah, exactly. So the parents feel like they don't belong, right? And that's why it's kind of fun, because I'm that awkward parent. I love getting involved. I have no shame, right? I have no shame, right? So, I'm old now. So I'm also involved in campus ministry. So the campus that we work at is at UCLA. So I'm involved in a ministry called KCM, right? And so I just spoke at KCM 2 weeks ago, and for the very first time I said, wow, I'm really old now, right? Because so when I go to KCM now, it's kind of fun for me because I see a lot of my friends' kids now at UCLA. And I felt like, wow, I'm really, really old because now the freshman class, I'm older than their parents, right? And so if I'm older than their parents, then man, they must be thinking like, what's this grandpa doing here today? So that's why that perception of, man, I feel awkward. And it's true. And that's why I'm thinking like maybe my days at KCM are over because I feel like I can't understand them, I can't relate with them or whatever. So the parents' perception of themselves, it really does affect them getting involved in our youth ministry as well. Any other idea? Oh, that's a good one, right? The parents, yeah.
Like the perception of like, oh, like the church should handle my kid's faith.
Okay.
So it's like, oh, like, well, you guys are doing something, so you go do it.
Right. And that's a big thing, right? Yeah. They feel like, you know what, that's what we're paying you to do, right? You're there to take care of our kids as if we are the babysitters, right? Because they feel like that's our job, right? And that's what it is. When I used to do youth ministry, I did youth ministry for 13 years, right, when I first began. And that's what it was, right? They would just drop off the kids and they would just leave. The unique thing about the second call of my youth ministry was that we had two separate buildings. Like, you had to drive from the main worship building for the parents. You had to drive to the youth building, right? So literally, we were on our own, right? We could burn the church down, no one would know, right? Literally, we were on our own, right? So that whole building was left to me, right? Because I was doing the EM, I was doing the youth, I was doing the elementary, like literally I was doing everything there. And so that's what they would do. They would just drop them off because of the fact that that's your world and that this is our world, right? So that's another good example, right? That perception of that's your job. So that, you know what, I don't need to get involved. I can leave it there as well. That's a good one. So perception of parents, their own perception, the whole idea of dropping, that's your job, that's what you have to do. Any other things that prevents parents getting involved in what's your own experience? Yeah.
I mean, this might be the minority of some of our parents, but if the parents aren't believers and the kids want to be part of the youth group, but the parents do not share the same faith.
Right. And that's a unique situation, right? It's when the parents are not believers, right? So they just don't know, right? They don't know what to do, right? And so that's unique. That's how they drop them off. That's a good problem, I think, right? So that's how we're going to talk about that a little bit later, about how we can witness to them and be an example for them. But it's true. A lot of times parents just don't know, right? And that's why they drop them off and they just trust them into our hands in that way. But these are all good, right? These are things that we want to think about. What prevents me from overcoming my fears? Or what prevents me from working with others that are older, younger, different than me, right? That's a very important question you have to ask yourselves, right? Because of the fact that if you want our kids to learn how to deal with other people, then we also have to model that in the way that we deal with the parents as well. And so the next thing that we want to look at then is, oops. So we don't need to start that. So I did all that. Sorry about that. We need to partner with parents, right? We need to partner with parents in this way. So one thing we want to look at is the parents are our advocates. They're not our adversaries. Okay, we need to partner with parents because they have to be our advocates and not our adversaries. Okay, and the reason why I say that is because of the fact that who is the biggest influence in a kid's life, right? They would say two things, right? It's their parents and it's their peers, right? So the parents are the biggest influence in their life. And I realize how true that is, being a parent myself. And the one thing I realize is that kids are longing for the affection and the love of their parents, right? No matter how much they may be ashamed of them, no how much they're embarrassed by them, they still want that affection and that longing to be approved by their parents, right? And that's the greatest tension of all. Because what's the number one reason why kids leave the church later on? Their parents, right? The kids leave the church because of their parents, but at the same time, it's the parents that they would want the most, right? And so that's why, in order for us to have an effective youth ministry or to really effectively change the lives of our students, right, we have to ask ourselves, what's the biggest influence in their life? What will make them leave the church, or what will make them stay in the church? And if it's their parents, then we have to figure out how in the world we're going to partner with these parents, because of the fact that they can lead their kids astray. No matter how much I do, no matter how much fun I make, and no matter what I do, they're the biggest influence in their life. And why is that? Because obviously they're with them all the time. You only have a couple hours a week to have an influence on a child. Your parents are going to be there every single day, right? In their lives, doing whatever they can. And so obviously, because of it, we have to be willing to partner with our parents. So often it's not that we simply want them to be involved, we need them to be involved because we realize the importance of what they do for their families, right? So we need them to be advocates for us. We need them not to be our adversaries, but they're advocates, right? Because if discipleship is our goal for our students, then there's no one better than parents because they're the ones who are with the kids the most. But not only do we need to partner with parents, but who is the one who's supposed to be the primary discipler of children, of the youth? Is parents, right? We know that from Deuteronomy chapter 6, verses 4 through 9. I'm going to read that for you. Deuteronomy 6, verses 4 through 9. This is what it says for parents to do for their children. Deuteronomy 6, verses 4 through 9. Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your... I'm sorry. I'm going to read it again. With all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might. And these words that I command you today shall be on your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise. You shall bind them as sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. You shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on the gates, right? The Word of God tells us as parents, we are to install the Word of God in the lives of our children. And one of the things you have to understand, for a child to be born in a covenantal home is a blessing of God. Because you have the opportunity to hear the gospel from your parents, right? If you're born in a non-Christian home, you may never have the opportunity to hear the gospel. But because you are in a Christian home, you have the opportunity to hear the gospel. And therefore, that weight of that responsibility is even that much greater for the parent to do so and obey that commandment. Because if we don't, then the kids may go wayward in their life, right? And that's why we have to encourage our parents and remind them of that responsibility, that we're not the primary discipler, right? As a youth pastor, I'm not there to replace them as the parent. Sometimes as youth pastors, we always feel that pressure to say, you know what? Because the parents are not doing their job, I'm going to fill in. No, you will never be the parent, right? You will never be the substitute parent, right? In that way. But you need to come alongside and you need to encourage the parents to do their role. So one of the funny things about being a parent, one of the great things I ever heard is this. As a parent, it's kind of funny. When your children are small, you're a manager, right? You do everything when their kids are small. You change them, you feed them, you do everything. When they're in youth group, you're just a coach, right? So when you're in youth group, you don't manage them anymore. You kind of need to coach them about how to make good decisions, how to, make right choices, right? Or how to take responsibility, or how to get along with people. And then when they go to college, you're nothing but a consultant, right? That's why you're just reduced to consult. You just say, hey, this is my opinion. You can take it whatever you want, right? Because at that point, you know what? They're an adult, and how true that is. And that's what we have to help parents do. We have to help parents to be good coaches for their youth, for their kids, right? How to help them to make a decision. Not that they can make every decision for them anymore, but to guide them along them, right? And so that's why we need to partner with parents to help them fulfill their responsibility of what it means to be the ultimate discipler, or the ultimate one to equip their children with the truth of the gospel, right? We need to partner with parents. And not only that, but parents are a great resource, right? Right? They're a great resource for our youth ministry because of the fact they can provide a warm and inviting environment so that other students can come and grow, right? One of the best things about the church that we're in, one of the things that is that our parents are very involved, right? And so what do? They open up their homes, right, for our monthly youth activities, right? So they'll open up a home, they'll provide food, and all the kids will come to that home, right? So that they can have time of fellowship, so that they can learn, so that they can grow, right? And it creates an opportunity for the young people to get to know these adults in the church and build relationships with them as well. And so that's one of the beautiful things. One of the things that I feel like God has gifted me in my church was for these past 23 years is that my kids have like 100 aunts and uncles, right? Because of the fact they all helped me raise my children. And so the beautiful thing at UCLA was 3 of our students who grew up their whole lives together went to UCLA together, and they're still there, right? And that's their friend group. That's their like nucleus where if they ever need someone to talk to, they have each other, right? And so, but it's because of these parents who have been so involved, because of the parents, that we were able to provide that support and security for our children, right? So it provides a warm and inviting atmosphere. One of the things I notice as an adult, as a parent, is this. Your kids get closer to other kids when the parents are friends, right? When the parents are friends, it's a natural bent that the kids feel a little bit of security and comfort, and as a result of it, they get closer together in that way. And it's kind of funny that way. So it's funny because my son, my oldest son at UCLA, his 2 roommates are my college buddies' sons, right? They're 2 roommates, right? College buddies that we've been together friends for a long time. And one of their friends that every Christmas, we have Christmas parties, right? And we got together every Christmas, right? And the kids didn't really know each other that well, right, at the time. And so when my son was looking for a roommate his freshman year, you go on Instagram, you kind of find each other, match each other. And so my son goes, hey, this guy kind of cool, right? Maybe I should ask him to be my roommate. My youngest said, you idiot. We've been having Christmas lunch dinner with this guy every year for the past how long? Like he didn't make that connection. But because of the idea that we've been together, there was a sense of security and comfort, and they became roommates that freshman year, right? That's how it began. Now they're roommates for 3 years now. And the other roommate is a college friend of mine who transferred in, and he's been my friend for so long. And there's a sense of security and comfort, right? Because those kids know me, and they know our friends, and that network, and they get closer together. That's why this idea of having parents are a great resource, because it creates that sense of security and comfort where the kids feel safe, where they can kind of come together, and that when they get automatically closer together. And so those are the benefits that you can have as well. And I noticed that not only amongst Asian Americans, but we have, I got to tell you a funny story. So we have a friend, so one of my kids, my 3 kids, they have another family, they're a Caucasian family, that we went to school together all these years. And one year, when my kids were in junior high school, I said, hey, we're going to go on spring break with the Turners. And I thought the kids were like, yeah, that's awesome, Dad. They're like, what? I said, yeah, we're going to go spring break with the Turners. My oldest goes, that's kind of weird. Well, why is that so weird? Well, they're not like us. I said, what do you mean they're not like us? Well, they're not Korean, right? I was like, why? So what people we do Korean, we do it differently? No, that's just weird, right? But we did it. We did it, and those 3 kids, right, my oldest, my middle, and my youngest, are best friends with their 3 kids. But because of the fact that we did things together, right? We did things together, and they felt that security and that safety. That's why parents are a great resource, right? They're there to provide wisdom and guidance, right? To be an example for them. But again, it's different because we're English speaking. We're not affiliated with a language church, right? We're an Asian American church, so we don't have those kind of language barriers. But the families are able to learn. The kids are able to learn from these other parents. That's why they're a great resource, right? And another reason why we need to partner with parents is because they need our support and they need our encouragement, right? Parenting is hard, right? It's absolutely hard. And they need someone to encourage them. They need someone to say, you know what, it's going to be okay. I'll tell you right now, parenting is crazier now than ever before. It is crazy. And I'll tell you why it's crazy, right? A couple of reasons why it's crazy. The kids' demands for going to college today are crazy, right? So, my kids, like I said, are at UCLA, at Claremont McKenna, and they did well. But for them to do well, the amount of stuff, they had to write 13 extracurricular activities that they did, right, when they applied for college. 13, okay? My son and daughter have done more things you could ever possibly imagine, right? From sports, from club sports, to speech and debate, to ASB, to whatever, right? Boys and girls state, from whatever, all these things. And who's taking them around? Us, right? And the thing is, for parents, they feel like, you know what, if I don't do all these things for my children, then I'm not doing what's best for my kids. So parents today feel this enormous pressure to provide all these opportunities for their kids in order for their kids to succeed. And if we don't do that, then we failed as parents. That is the mindset of a parent, right? That's the pressure that parents feel to this day, right, in that way. So because of it, parents need us to come alongside them to say, hey, it's okay. Their identity is not in their success. Their identity is in Christ, right? This is what they need to hear, that it's going to be okay. God has a sovereign plan for them, right? Yesterday, UC Irvine and UC San Diego came out with their college acceptances. And you can really tell the sense at our church, nobody wants to talk about it. Nobody wants to ask, hey, do you hear anything yet, right? And so it's stressful, absolutely stressful in every way, right? Not only that, but parents, like our brother said here, they feel inadequate. They just don't feel like they know what to do, right? They have a perception of themselves like, I can't provide anything for my students. So that's why they need us. They need us for us to be a resource. They need us to help them to speak into their lives when they have questions about social media or they talk about mental health issues or whatever it may be. Because you know what? Even though we're not the experts, that we can provide support for them, right? We can speak into what's going on in the social media world, what's going on in our culture, right? We can explain to them why things are at school the way that they are or why they feel a certain way. So we can be a resource for them. Not that we're going to replace them. But they need us because they need help. It's not like they don't want to lead and guide their kids. It's not like they don't want to disciple their children. They just don't know how, right? As a matter of fact, they didn't know how to disciple themselves. How are they going to disciple these kids? So that's why they need us to come alongside and equip them with resources. So say, hey, pray with them, maybe read the Word of God with them on a daily basis. Just kind of give a suggestion. Not that you're going to say this is what you have to do, but just to come alongside to encourage them and say, hey, these are some of the things that you might want to consider in that way. But not only that, the reason why we want to partner with parents is so that, that they can mature and grow. The thing is, as they mature and grow, and they grow in their faith, that they will automatically it will go down to their kids, right? If they grow and they know the importance of the gospel in their own lives, it will trickle down to their kids. It will be an impact upon their kids' life, right? And so it's a way for discipleship for the parents. As you and I work with their parents, that we can disciple them and guide them and lead them as well. So this is the reason why I feel like is that we need to partner with parents because they need us. They really need us. Not only that, but they're the biggest influence amongst our kids in that way. Are there any other ideas that you may have of why you feel like a parent might need you guys? Like why do you need to partner with parents? Any other ideas that you may have or you thought of when it comes to this? Anyone? About your need? All right, then we're going to talk about best practices, okay? Or best practices to deal with practical ways to partner with parents, okay? So number one, obviously, is to communicate with parents, right? This is absolutely essential, okay? That you need to communicate to them, not that you simply want them, but that you need them. So how can you communicate better with parents, right? And so these are some of the suggestions that I have, I remember doing what I used to do when I was in youth ministry itself. So one of the things that you want to do is to share with them and keep them informed of what is going on in your youth ministry, right? What's going on in your youth ministry? So I don't know how much you guys send out emails to your parents or you do a newsletter to your parents, but it's very helpful. So my wife's a principal at an elementary school. So every week, what does she do? She sends an email out, a newsletter, right? Highlighting all that they did in that week, right? what they accomplished or what the kids have learned and what things are coming up, just so that the parents are informed, right? In the same way, I think that we could do the same thing for our youth ministry every month, right? Every month, so the parents know what you're teaching, right? What you're teaching. So, for example, my youth director, right, he always talks about the series that he'll be going through with the parents, right? So that they know what they are learning, so that, you know what, if they're learning these things, maybe they can speak about these things with their students, right? So a monthly newsletter, a weekly email, or even a post on Facebook or anything on Instagram, that they have an avenue where they can give information of what is going on with the kids at your church, right? That is very important. I think that you need to communicate better with their parents so that they are aware, right? And you know what? If they don't speak the language that well, it's even better because at least they can read English, right? They can kind of pick it up, right? So that's why it's very important for you to be able to communicate, whether it be an email, whether it be a post, whether it be a newsletter, but to keep them updated of what is going on. Another thing is to text them, right? About their children. You know, affirm their children, right? One of the things is just so that they will know what they are doing well or what, you know, what highlight they did. You know, something that stood out so that the parents can be encouraged. Wow, my kid is like this. Because a lot of times, parents don't know what their kids do. They don't know what their kids are like. So that, you know what, you can say, hey, this is what they did today. And you can highlight them. Just yesterday, I'm the senior pastor, right? But one of our church members' daughter, she is 10 years old, and she was going to perform a dance near where I live. I live in Torrance, and so it's at the Redawning Performing Arts Center, okay? By the way, anyone who does dance is crazy, right? Dance is worse than sports. I'll tell you that much for sure, okay? So literally, I went, and it was raining. She goes, you don't have to come. It's okay. I'll be there. I'm already on my way. I went, right? I went to watch this 10-year-old girl perform, right? And understand this, her mom, the parent, was my youth group kid when she was 16 years old, right? And so I've been with her almost 30 years. Now I get the privilege of watching her daughter dance, right? So she's really close to me, right? And so I went to go watch her daughter dance, and it was 1 minute long. 1 minute. These people drive hours to go watch their daughter perform 1 minute. I was like, y'all crazy. I just want to go watch my kids play sports. It's like an hour and a half, whatever. Literally 1 minute. I was like, wow, this is nuts. And then you got to pay $25 for parking, right? For 1 minute. Literally 1 minute, right? Watch this kid dance for 1 minute, right? But you know what? It was pure joy. And I took a picture, and I showed my family, right? Look at Emma. How beautiful, how cute she is, right? And that's what it is to affirm so that they know what's going on, right? It's those little things, right, that speaks volumes to the parents, right, in that way. And that's what it is. It's like texting to affirm them, like to let them know what is going on. Or, for example, if a kid shares about, you know what, my family's going through a hard time. You know, my dad lost his job, or, you know, we might lose our house, or we got robbed, or whatever. In those moments, what do? You need to reach out to the parents and say, we're praying for you. Right? Let them know that you're praying for them, that you're aware and that you care and that you're ministering to the parent at that time of need. I think a lot of times when we hear things like that, I don't know when the last time you actually reached out to the parent and say, can we pray for you? Or we're praying for you in that moment, right? So those are the little things that we can do to encourage our parents, is to communicate better with them, right? And then not only that, but helping their kids understand their parents, right? We communicate better when we help our kids to understand their parents, right? In other words, we're supposed to be a bridge for them, right? We're supposed to be that avenue where a lot of times our kids can't understand their parents and why they are the way that we are. But I think that we need to be able to speak into their lives to help them to understand their parents, right? And the thing is, one day they'll become a parent and they will understand, right? Like we always hear that all the time, right? One of the things is when I became a senior pastor, I had to repent to all the senior pastors before me because I had such bad judgments about them, right? Because I thought I knew better than them until I became a senior pastor. And then I had to repent because I realized now I understand all the things that they have gone through in their own life, right? And the hardships in that way. But one of the things I realized, especially for immigrant families, you know, is their life is so hard. right? Their life is absolutely hard. And because of what they had experienced, think about my parents escaped war, right? It's kind of a crazy thought, right? And I never realized that until I got older. Like my parents literally escaped war, came here with absolutely nothing, and then they had to raise 3 kids. Yeah, they had a lot of shortcomings. Yeah, they all did that. But I have a great appreciation from them now. Why? Because of the fact that I see and understand what hardships they go through. That's why they always say every generation after the previous generation that's always lazier than the other generation, right? So that's why people say that Gen Z, like we always think Gen Z or millennials are lazier than us because we're the Gen Xers, right? Like, what's wrong with you? You know, you're always about this and that, about life balance. What do you mean life balance? There's no life balance, you know, that's how we talk about all the time, right? But then because that's how we were raised, right? Because we had crazy life. We had to raise like by ourselves. I was a latchkey kid. Me and my sister basically raised ourselves, right? Because my parents literally escaped war, right? So my kids are going to have a different life too. But that's just the reality. It's enabling us to help the communication between parents and kids to understand the hardships and why their parents act the way they do, the way that they are in that manner and in that way. And so it's really to help communicate with parents, right? The second thing is to encourage parent engagement, right? To encourage parent engagement. In other words, the way that practical ways is to help is really to be just upfront, asking parents to open up their homes for fellowship events, right? Opening up their homes for fellowship events, right? Inviting them to participate, right? Inviting them to participate in your worship services, right? Especially for those who have their own youth group services, that there should be an opportunity where there's joint services, right? I know that my friend's church in Virginia, every month they have joint worship where all the children join worship. And in that worship, the children lead the worship. This is a church that has 700 people. So all the kids join on that once a month where the kids participate in the worship with their families, right? And I think it's a beautiful thing, right? In the same way, I think it's important that we invite our parents to, hey, you know, once a month or maybe once every other month, to have the parents join the kids in worship, right? To create that opportunity where they can learn and model for their kids what it's like to worship. So they can sit and they can listen to the same message and perhaps have a discussion about maybe when they go home about what they learned. To create those opportunities where kids and parents can be able to speak with one another, right? So it's really getting them engaged, right? You're not going to get them engaged unless you ask. You have to ask. You have to be willing to be that bold, right? And so for our church, right, because we meet out of school, we don't have a building that we can come on a weekly basis. So our monthly fellowship activities are absolutely essential for our youth group kids, right? So once a month, somebody opens up their home and everybody drives out and they meet at their parents', that family's home itself. So again, it's important for them to engage and be invited to participate, whether it be the youth group events, whether it be the youth group service, whether they open up their home, so that these opportunities can exist, right? Establish a youth group PTA, right? In other words, establish, right, where the parents can come together and to talk about how they can support the youth group, right? Where you can moderate it, where you can lead that discussion, but maybe they would have ideas about what they would want to do to help support, whether it be providing food, whether it be providing rides, whether it be providing events, right? That's a great resource for you as a youth pastor to be able to have parents who are willing to come together, right, and to provide support, right? You need that support, right? So maybe having a parent to be the lead person, the president or whatever, to gather some other parents to establish the PTA, right? So that they can figure out how they can better support the youth ministry. But the PTA is not only about supporting the youth ministry, but it's about creating an opportunity for parents to get together and maybe share their lives together about with their own struggles that they have with their own children, right? That's the thing. You need to provide opportunities for parents to come together to find comfort and to find support amongst each other so that they know that they're not alone. Right? So often they feel like, you know what, I'm alone in this. But if you have a PTA, right, they feel like, you know what, we're in this together. So that's why I think a PTA is helpful. Not only does it provide support for your youth ministry, but it provides a support group for each of the parents to come alongside and to help each other, right? So that's an important thing, to create a PTA in that way. And the other way that you can also help parents engage is to create opportunities for parents to get to know you, right? To get to know you, right? So that's why it's important. I'm not sure if you do this, but it's establish times where you will meet with the parent and the student on their own, I think it's absolutely essential in every youth ministry where you as a pastor, youth pastor, or youth director, needs to spend time with that student, with their family. Just so that you are understanding that unique family dynamic. You have to understand what is going on in that kid's home. If the parents are the biggest influence, well, what is that influence? Do they feel pressure for academics? Do they feel pressure for sports? Do they feel, what is it that's going on? So that you know how to pray for that kid, you know how to minister to that kid, and that also gives you the opportunity for the parents to get to know you. Here's the thing, it's been often been said, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And how can a parent know how much you care unless you're willing to make that time to get to know the parents as well as to get to know the kid in that unique dynamic, right? So it's important that you establish this opportunity, a visitation, right? Visiting the kid's home, right? Going into their home, seeing their home dynamic could be absolutely essential for you to really be able to disciple and raise your student the way that they would need to go. So I think visitation, create opportunities for the parents to get to know you is absolutely essential. And last but not least is equipping parents. Like our brother said, they feel inadequate. So how can you equip parents? Well, when you do that monthly newsletter, what you can do is provide links, resources, saying, hey, here's a book on this topic. Here's a website or an article. Things that you may want to consider, right? Again, you're not replacing them. You're just providing a resource for them, right? And so they need to be equipped, right? Maybe have sessions on topics, like, for example, on social media and the effects of social media, maybe on AI, or talking about what's going on with their kids, just so that parents are aware. One of the things is parents have no clue what is going on, okay? So that's why I'm that parent that has no clue what's going on in my kid's life. So I'm the fun parent. My wife's the scary parent, right? I'm the good cop. She's the bad cop, right? And so I didn't know kids have private Instagram accounts. They have a public one and a private one. I didn't know that. Oh yeah, right? So my wife's always trying to figure out what's the private one. Well, what are they hiding from us, right? So my wife, she has Be Real. She does Be Real because she wants to make sure that she can see my kids be real, all this kind of stuff, right? My son's 21. We still have Life 360. We track him down to know where he is. My wife's like stalker, right? She wants to know every moment what the kids are doing, where they're at. For me, it's like they're adults, but no, she's that person. But it's providing resources for these parents, so it kind of helps them to know maybe what's going on, right? So they're not unaware. Because these kids may have a front that looks like, hey, everything's perfect and everything's good. But the reality is there might be a darker side to them that they just never knew. How often we have heard parents say, I never knew that about my child. And I think as a youth pastor or a youth director, we can inform them of things that are just going on. What's going on in the culture? What's going on with youth today, right? Because you know what? This is what you're studying. This is what you're learning. So maybe applying those resources to parents so that they are aware, right? So for example, for me, I know what's going on in the state of California, education. Because of it, I try to speak into parents' lives so that they become aware of what is going on, what are the trends, what is the new things or the new patterns. Just so the parents are aware so they can make good informed decisions about how to help and navigate their child. Right, so it's about equipping your parents with these resources so that they can do these things. And so the question I want to ask you is like, is there anything that you feel like is a best practice for your church when it comes to having parents partner with you? I'm kind of curious, like, what do you guys do at your churches to help parents partner with you when it comes with youth ministry? Anybody? Maybe that's why you're here again, right? This is why you want to learn these kind of things. But is there anything, yeah?
Actually, so we started this year, one of our youth leaders, he's a parent, a student in our ministry, and he has been leading what we call Parent Connect. So every other week for a set amount of time, we had parents come during this ministry and they would lead, and they would get to know each other, because a lot of times when they're seniors and they have a grad party, they're like, I didn't know you were a parent of like so-and-so, like they're my best friend, or they're my student's best friend. So we've seen a lot of fruit just from doing that for months now.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's a good example of that, right? Anyone else, a good practice that you do, how you get parents involved in your church, right? But I hope that the whole point of the seminar was really to help you to see the importance of why we need to get parents engaged, right? They're not our adversaries, right? They're our advocates. They're our partners, right? They're the people that we want to deal with and work with. So in closing our session today, as we have a couple minutes left, is that I want to ask, is there any questions that you want to ask me? I'm not an expert on this area, right? I'm just speaking from life experience, right, of 23 years of doing adult ministry and family ministry within our church itself, right? And if any questions that you would like to ask. Yes.
How would you suggest approaching those relationships where there is a language barrier? You mentioned like visiting with parents, but like I work at a primarily Korean American church, and like their parents are first-gen Korean immigrants, and so there is that natural language barrier. Myself not being Korean, so how would you suggest kind of
Right.
navigating that relationship?
So that's a very good question. How do you reach out when there's a language barrier, right? So my approach to that is just try, right? So the biggest thing is action speaks louder than words, right? So like a visitation is just being there at the parent's home, even though you may not be able to speak with them, just your presence speaks volumes, huge. I remember that I was literally like 2 months ago, I was in Hawaii on a trip, and I got word that my assistant pastor's wife's dad broke his neck in Hawaii too, right beforehand, right? And so he was in the hospital. I was on my vacation in Hawaii, and as soon as I heard it, I knew I had to go and visit, okay? But I knew also my Korean is no bueno, right? And so I was like, okay, what do? Do I just say, I'll pray for you? Or do I step away on my vacation and go visit him at the hospital, right? What do you do? What do you do at that moment? I'm just being real, I'm being honest, right? What do you do, right? And so at that moment, I thought, I have to go see him. I have to go see him. And I went to go see him, and he was in the hospital, and he was just grateful that I came and I prayed for him, right? And it was like, my assistant pastor's wife flew in, so she was there, and she was helping her dad, and the dad was there, and all I could do was read in English a Bible verse and just say, hope you're okay, and pray for him, right? I think that speaks volumes, not only for the dad, but it spoke volumes for my assistant pastor's wife, because of the fact that it showed that you care, right? And so that you know that you were just there, right? So often, I think for language barrier communities, I think action speaks louder than words. I think so often we put more prevalence on words, but I think that just being there is absolutely huge, right? Because you're limited. No matter what, you're going to be limited in that way. But that's absolutely huge. Now, if there's an issue of discipline, if there's an issue of hardship, that's when you need to get the senior pastor involved, or the session involved, the elders involved, right? And so one of the other ways that you communicate with parents better too is that if you feel like if there's a big parent situation, family dynamics are really bad, you need to get the senior pastor involved, right? The senior pastor needs to be able to speak to that member and say, hey, you know what, your children are falling apart here. And he needs to be aware of that situation, be able to speak into that situation. But in my life experience, I've always known is your presence matters more than anything else. I'll tell you why. People won't remember what you said, but they'll remember that you were there. They'll remember that you were there. As a senior pastor, you have funny stories about dumb things you have said, right? When you're in those hard moments, right? My other assistant pastor, there's an assistant pastor that I was served with me for 16 years, and now he's a lead pastor, like my little brother. And when his wife was about to pass away, she had cancer, and she was one of my closest friends, and she was about to pass away. I was the last person to see her who was not family. And I was like, oh my gosh, what do you say? What am I going to say in that moment, right? You're like, this is going to be the last time I'm going to see her while she was alive. So I thought, you know what, I got this. And I go in, and I see her, my dear bro, who was an assistant pastor, he's there. And I said, hey, Maria, what are you dying to do? I was like, I didn't know I said that. I was like, what are you dying to do, right? Like, whatever, right? Whatever. I just went on, right? And it was all done, right? I was so relieved when I got out of that room. And then my assistant pastor came out. He goes, hey, James, thanks for being here. But I just want you to know what you said when you came? I said, what did I say? He goes, you asked Maria, what are you dying to do, right? And I wanted to die in that moment. I was like, no, I did not say that. I did not say that, right? But again, you're so stressed out. But I think what she saw was my heart. You know, more than the words that I loved her, I cared for her, I was there. And that's what it is. And I realized it's like moments like that in ministry. So often we're so worried about the things that we say. And I think we should say the right thing, and we want to say the right things. But I think your presence speaks volumes. And I think that they know that you can't speak well, but they know when you're there that you care. So that's why don't let language be a barrier. Just show up. Just show up. And by showing up, they're saying, wow, this person really cares. This person is willing to overcome that barrier and to show up. So one of the things I've learned about ministry is presence means so much. Like even as a pastor, right? Your kid's not there, it hurts you. But when they're there, it means so much. Same thing. Just show up and just act in that way. Any other questions that you want to ask? Yes.
I appreciate your point about enhancing communication with parents. And I think my question is if you have any thoughts or guidelines about what things should be confidential and what things shouldn't, or if there are any things that should or should not be. Like I'm not talking about like safety concerns or anything like that, but like, you know, if a kid just shares something in small group or something like that, like should we communicate things with parents? Should we not communicate things with parents? You know,
Right.
If the kid says something, I just want to share this with you, you know.
So that's the thing, right? So one of the things that takes much wisdom, right? And so, because you have to understand too, for a kid, you're also their safe place, right? And you have to keep that confidential level there too, right? I think that it's important. Now, it's a matter of a safety issue, you have to be able to discuss those things, right? If it's a matter of, and that's the thing, I think even when those matters of where you feel like safety issues or like gender issues, they want to have those talks, you need to inform that child, hey, I know that this is how you feel, but I want you to know eventually you need to talk to your parents, right? You need to let them know, hey, you need to get to that point where you feel comfortable, right? So my whole thing with the law about, you know what, you're not allowed to tell the parents, right? I'm saying no. I say, you know what, maybe for a couple days so that kid can kind of digest it, but eventually you need to tell the parents, right? In my opinion, right? When it comes to the teacher, right? That kind of stuff. In the same way with a kid, you need to keep that confidential level with that kid, right? But at the same time, knowing that your hope is for that kid, you'll never tell the parents, but you want the kid to get to that point where they can share with their parents and to let them know, right? That's going to be your goal, right? Your goal is not say, yeah, you know what, whatever you tell me is going to be private, it will always stay with me. But you can't have the mindset, well, that's where it's going to end. No, you want to say, okay, now that I know this, how can I help this child to help eventually get to that point where they can tell their mom and dad, right? That's what you want. You don't want to be always the last guy to that they feel confidentiality. You got to figure out, how can I get to that point where they will tell their parents, right? Well, they're their parents. And it's kind of funny because, so you know, I told you about the 3 friends in college, right? So the 3 parents and I are all part of the same church. And they're like, hey, I got to tell you something about your kid. But you can't tell your kid, right? Because they tell their parents about their friend, and then we get all the 411, right? It's great. We love it in that way, right? But again, you want them to be able to express and share on their own. But again, at the same time, that's why the whole idea, the confidential will be confidential, right, on those matters. But again, my hope is that you will lead them so that they can eventually be able to tell their parents on their own without you having to tell them. Again, if it's by law, like if it's abuse or whatever, then you have to do something. But when it comes to like struggles or like temptations or addiction, like even like let's say pornography, like I'm having an issue, right? You can help and guide them in that situation, but then you need to also help them so that they can maybe talk to their parents in that way, in that manner, for that. And so that's why it's important. That's a very great question. Yes. Yes.
One more question. If you're working with like a larger group setting, so like students, maybe like my church has like 70 kids.
Yeah.
And sometimes I think it's a little harder to reach out to the families or the students or the parents. So I'm wondering how we can train the teachers or your thoughts on how to approach a larger group setting.
So for like larger churches, I think that's where you have to utilize the teachers, right? You have to be able to have the teacher now be able to go. But again, it's just saying the same thing, right? It's not about what you say, it's about being there for them, right? Or having that communication with the parents itself, because you can. But I would try, like if you have 60, 80 kids, right? You have 365 days, you have 52 Sundays. So if you actually think about it, if you do 2 kids a Sunday, that you could do it in 2 kids a Sunday. That's the thing. I think there's always a way around that, right? And so, because you got to think about senior classes, right? Is that, you have a couple hundred, right? But you got to visit and minister to all 200 whatever kids, parents, I mean. So the same way with the youth group that big, I think that you have to be able to find ways to meet with the parents, but at the same time is to empower the teachers and equipping them. Like, what do you do when you visit? Right? Read a verse, pray with them, and just talk. That's all that's simple. That's all it is. But just being there, I think, will speak volumes for the family itself, right? More than anything else. Yes. Any other questions? So I think the big takeaway from here today was you need parents, and they need you. They really need you to partner with them. They can't do this on their own. I know that I love my youth director. It's going to be sad that when they go. And I think one of the things is that at our church, I want to encourage you to stay there as long as possible. So one of the gifts that people always ask me, like, why are your kids the way they are today? My kids, by God's grace, still go to church. My kids are doing well in school. And I tell them that one of the secrets for me was that my kids have only known one church for 23 years. That's our church. And they've only known one city for 23 years. There's never been a transition in their life, right? It's always been that stable, constant family for 23 years, right? And I think that's what it is. It's that creating a sense of stability and safety for their students. I asked my daughter that one day. I said, what is it that you feel like your mom and dad gave you? And she said, you gave us stability and confidence. And the reason why we gave them confidence is because that we never moved, right? We stayed at one church, and we never moved to home. And she said, because of it, my kindergarten friends are my friends to this day. That's huge. And I think the same way, to create that sense of stability for your youth ministry is a very important thing. So I want to encourage you, to hang in there, work with their parents. They're there for you as well. So let me just close this in a final word of prayer. God, I thank you just for these individuals here today. Father God, reminds me, Lord, when I was in their seats working with kids, and I felt like I was a kid trying to help kids. But God, I thank you for their hearts, and I pray that, God, that they would know that you're your servants, and that, God, that you are using them. And God, there'll be moments where they may say the wrong thing, they may mess up here and there, but God, it is your grace that covers them. Your grace is sufficient for them. And I pray that, God, that those awkward moments of dealing with parents, Lord, with language issues or age issues or cultural issues, Lord, that, God, that they will overcome it by reminding ourselves that, God, we're all children of God. We're all brothers and sisters in Christ. And I pray that, God, that we can develop that unity and share in that unity and really support one another. So we thank you, Lord, just for everyone that's here. Bless everyone here today. I pray that our time at this conference will truly be a blessing. And in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Thank you, guys.